Hey everybody, this is McKay Garner coming back at you with some Ableton Live tips for electronic drumming. And we're going to be using MIDI clips today to perform things like playing chords with a single pad, stepping through melodies by hitting a single pad, triggering audio clips, or triggering multiple events of different drum sounds from a single drum pad. One thing I discovered after playing different types of electronic drum kits over the years is that trying to edit on a small LCD screen can really be an exercise in frustration. There's often several menus that you have to step through just to get one function to change, whether it's the MIDI note of each pad or stepping through so that you can have different notes play when you hit pads. I always wanted to see these things visually so that I could quickly create chords and motifs for each pad. So I took some time and created an Ableton Live set with a bunch of custom configured Ableton Live MIDI plugins that allow me to do all these functions and see them visually right here on the screen. I also discovered that I had a lot more power to do things that were previously only in my brain in Ableton Live. And it's become an exciting new part of my studio and live setup. So the first thing you want to do is create a MIDI clip using the Create button here. You've got quick keys for all these functions over here on your right, but for now we'll use the menu so you can see that I'm inserting a MIDI clip into this slot. Now what I've done is each one of these different channels I've associated with a specific drum pad on my drum kit. I've put a MIDI clip in here that's going to start out being blank, but I can easily draw in using the draw tool or by double clicking on one of these notes. I can draw in what notes I want this MIDI clip to play when I hit play on the MIDI clip. So I can draw in chords. I could also, let me undo that. I could draw in different motifs, etc. And when I trigger that clip, it's going to play through those things. Okay. I actually usually like to play these motifs mostly on my own because it leaves a lot of room for variation. And I likes me some variation. So, what I've done here is I've taken these different channels and I've created MIDI clips on each of them, some with chords, some with single notes that I'm going to turn into motifs and melodies, and some of these channels over here actually have audio clips on them. Now the first thing that we need to do is, right now I can trigger these with my mouse, but I want to trigger them with drum pads. So I'm going to enable MIDI mapping in Ableton Live by clicking this MIDI button right here. Okay. As you can see here, these MIDI clips already have some numbers and letters assigned on top of them. The first number is your MIDI channel that the pad is sending information out on, and the second one is the MIDI note. Let's take a look at pad 6. So after I'm in MIDI mapping mode and I click on one of these MIDI clips I've created, I can hit a pad. If you notice on the bottom right of your screen, I have a camera on my drum CAD here. I'm going to hit this pad, and you can see it created a MIDI channel, MIDI note assignment there. So now when I turn MIDI mapping off, and I click on pad number 6, or I hit it, it's actually going to trigger that MIDI clip. So now I have this MIDI clip assigned to that pad. Same thing for pad number 1, which I have an E minor chord playing really shortly right now. When I hit it, it's a really short burst of an E minor chord. If I hold down my left foot on the sustain pedal like a keyboard player would do, I can determine how long that note is, that chord. Okay, so each one of these channels, I have set up a series of MIDI plugins that come with Ableton Live. If we look over here, click on the Live plugins menu, I'll see MIDI effects, And I have a lot of different options here to drag over to these tracks. On pad number 1 that's playing a chord, I have a MIDI pitch plugin, which allows me to easily change what octave that chord's going to play in. I can transpose it from an E minor chord up to a G minor chord, etc., just by changing increments of the pitch plugin. Then I have a note length plugin, which allows me to determine how long that chord is going to play. Right now it's playing a burst of 42 milliseconds. If I bring that up, just by hitting the pad, it's going to play that longer. I just undo that. Okay. Now if I look at my pad number 6 that I just assigned, I've got something totally different happening. Pad number 6, right now it says C1. I just have default C1s that I drag over from a bank of MIDI clips. Let's double click on this C1 clip and find out that I actually changed that C1, dragged it up here to an E2. So that clip is playing an E2 note. What I'd normally do is, just to keep memory of what's playing what, I may rename that to E2. And I can look through these different MIDI clips and see what's happening. However, this particular note is going to be changing every time I hit it, and I'm going to define what those notes are. First, I start with a pitch plugin just in case I want to transpose things on the fly really quickly. I can go up an octave, etc., change in half steps, you name it. I also have a random plugin which I use to tell this clip that every time I hit it, or trigger that MIDI clip, it's going to step up to another event. I'm using the note length as well so that I can change how long those notes are going to be. And then I'm using something called the scale plugin, which I've renamed to alternating notes, so that when I hit this clip, every time I trigger this event, it's going to step through that grid. So I'm going to play pad number 6 and you'll see what I'm talking about. A little portamento makes it a little squeakier. Okay, hold down the sustain pedal. I can get different clusters and chords. So in combination with my E minor chord on pad 1, I can get different extended chords or suspensions depending on what notes I have entered into this grid. So a quick rundown on how this grid works is you set a base for what the bottom of this grid, what the note is going to be. In this case, I have it set to E. So as you go up this grid, it's going to be E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, etc., all the way up. And then the next note that I hit, next time I hit the pad, is going to be whatever note I've selected here. So you see the first time I hit it's going to be an E, and then there's going to be a G, and then there's going to be an A, and so on as you go up. So I'm going to show you one more time. And you can transpose that or move those notes around. You can take some of these out, so when you hit that particular part of the sequence of notes, it's actually going to play silence. So you could play straight 16ths or 8ths or some kind of alternating pattern, and it won't actually play sound on every one of those notes. So you get these broken kind of motifs and melodies, which is actually really cool once we get into the drum sound tutorial as well, because you can have it stepping through different drum sounds on each one of these notes. Super powerful thing to do. I also use a pitch bend pedal on my hybrid kit, so that as I'm playing a chord, I can transpose and I can slowly bend into those different things as I'm playing live. So it gives me a lot of power to create different harmonic colors. I can do the same thing when I'm playing the single notes and have these kind of blippy pitch bend kind of events going on that it's really fun to play and create on the spot. So how does all this information get to your sound module, or virtual sound module, I should say? In this case, if you look right here, my MIDI information is being routed to the channel that's called, in this case, Synth McKay, and that is over here. So if I double click on this, you see I have a layer of different synths and samplers. All of these clips are being sent over to this chain of synth and samplers, so that when I play these, they're actually triggering this module over here. Now, one thing you could do to get even freakier is to have an individual synth or sampler on each one of these channels just by dragging it over to the channel. So you could be playing an E minor chord on your synth here. You could have some kind of strings or vocals playing through these other melodies here. The possibilities are pretty endless, and it's really exciting to play. It gives you a lot of power to pull off a lot of things. Sometimes I like to trigger, I'll have a bass drum sound on my kick drum pedal, but I'll also be stepping through a bass melody using this alternating pattern. So I'm triggering a kick drum, and along with the kick drum, you're hearing this massive bass sound that's changing notes as I play it. So one last thing, from the song Return by Doppio, I have set up these different chords and melodies, but I also have set up the ability to turn drum loops and bass lines on and off. In this case, I have a fully programmed drum part that I have assigned to this particular clip right here. So I'll go back into MIDI mapping mode, click on the clip that I want to trigger, and I'm going to hit a pad up here. You can see it assign that MIDI note to that clip. Got a couple of different launch modes. Toggle means I hit it once, it's going to turn on. I hit it again, it's going to turn off. You can find a lot of information about these on YouTube or the Ableton site about how these different clips work. But in this case, when I hit this pad, I'm going to trigger the drum pattern, turn it off. Then I've got my melodies. Etc. So you've got lots of things to play with. It gives you a lot of power to be able to play acoustic drums and trigger different melodies and pads, melodies and chords as you're playing. You can turn different things on and off. I also use these different MIDI clips to trigger effects events. So I may want to have things like LFOs or delays, etc., being modulated when I turn on one of these clips. So it gives you a lot of power to do a lot of things. It's just endless possibilities of using MIDI with Ableton Live and electronic drums. Okay, so here's a bird's eye view. Left foot, I'm using a pedal for sustain here, this guy. So if I play a chord here and hold down my left foot, I get sustain. My right foot's triggering a single note, a low E, which is kind of short until I hold down my left foot. And then my right foot here with this pedal, it's a CV pedal. I can use that for pitch bend. So left foot holding down and my right foot changing the pitch. I can create different chord movement. So on something like the song Return, I can use these pedals extensions of these chords using my pitch bend. So by triggering a bass line and a drum loop with this guy, I can actually play the chorus of this tune. Something like... I hope this tutorial inspires you to do something really creative of your own. This is McKay Garner. Enjoy.